This is the first part of the story. The series begins with Fuuko Izumo, a girl who just finished reading her favorite long-running girls' manga series after reading it for a long time. After learning the ending of her favorite manga, Fuuko decides to do the unthinkable, because she believes she no longer has a purpose in life. Suddenly, a muscular man appears shirtless, and Fuuko thinks that he intends to stop her. Fuuko then pointed a knife at him, saying that he will suffer from a deadly disease if he touches her. However, the man completely ignores Fuuko's warning and deliberately stabs himself with her knife, even going as far as touching her. He apparently wants to prove Fuuko's words even though it is very dangerous, because he could lose his life. This frustrated Fuuko, because she knows that he'll soon lose his life in vain.
Bring it on! My hand was all over you!
My unluck! I'm so sorry.
Soon after that, Fuuko is startled by the appearance of a rolling head, and it turns out to be the head of the man who had just had an accident right after touching her. However, the man regenerated himself and restored his own body, due to his amazing regenerative abilities. Seeing this, Fuuko feels frightened and tries to resist when he approaches her. Nevertheless, the man seems still curious about Fuuko's power, so he catches her and hurriedly takes her away from the scene as some policemen arrive to investigate. The man then takes Fuuko to the rooftop of a skyscraper, where he threatens to drop her, because Fuuko refuses to explain her power to him. Unexpectedly, Fuuko tells the man to drop her, because she indeed wants to end her life. However, the man seems unwilling to let Fuuko die, as he is still curious about her abilities, so he continues to persuade Fuuko to tell him about her past. Shortly after, Fuuko finally recounts her past, specifically a decade ago when she was just 8 years old. At that time, her parents were preparing for a business trip by plane. Unaware of her own power, Fuuko warmly embraced her parents. However, when Fuuko's parents and all the passengers boarded the plane about to take off, unexpectedly, the plane exploded, and the powerful explosion killed everyone on board, including Fuuko's parents. After the incident, Fuuko finally realized that she could bring misfortune to anyone who touched her body directly. Therefore, Fuuko began to cover her entire body, so that people would not suffer when they accidentally touched her. Instead of being afraid of Fuuko's power, the man deliberately touches her skin, which then causes him to experience misfortune, as he is suddenly hit by a wooden crate containing bananas. At that moment, Fuuko tries to escape from the man, but she accidentally steps on a banana, causing her to slip and fall from the roof. Thinking that her life is about to end badly, Fuuko instantly regrets her decision and hopes someone will save her. Upon seeing this, the man hurriedly saves Fuuko because he will not let her die. He believes that Fuuko, with her special power, can give him something he has longed for, the best death. Therefore, he then takes Fuuko to an abandoned building, which is his hideout. On the other hand, unbeknownst to them, a group of secret agents seems to be watching them from a distance and secretly trailing them. Upon arrival there, the man again forces Fuuko to explain her ability, telling her to strip off all her clothes so he can touch her skin to measure the level of misfortune he will receive. Upon hearing this, Fuuko feels immediately embarrassed and attempts to flee from the man. In her attempt to escape, her jacket accidentally falls off, torn by a piece of iron. At the same time, the hat worn by Fuuko also comes off, revealing her long hair. Realizing that her escape is futile, Fuuko becomes frustrated and cries, explaining to him that she cannot even ask someone to cut her hair, because they will experience misfortune after touching her hair directly. Upon learning this, the man offers to cut her hair, but Fuuko immediately stops him, warning him not to touch her. However, the man convinces Fuuko that he is an undead with amazing regenerative abilities, so Fuuko doesn't need to worry about him, because he won't die just from touching Fuuko, who has the Unluck. Shortly after, the man successfully cuts Fuuko's hair without experiencing any misfortune, even though he touched Fuuko's hair for more than 15 minutes. However, their moment is interrupted by a sudden intrusion of secret agents, who swiftly decapitate the undead and contain his head in a special capsule to prevent him from using his regenerative abilities. The leader of the secret agents, Lee, seems to have known about Fuuko's abilities because he and his henchmen wear gloves to avoid the Unluck, which is Fuuko's ability. Lee intends to capture Fuuko and the undead so that his secret organization can study their abilities. But soon after that, they are surprised by the appearance of lightning striking the place, and at the same time, the undead manages to free himself. In a very short time, he regenerates his body and easily kills Lee's henchmen. Knowing that he cannot defeat the undead, Lee then takes Fuuko hostage. threatening to kill her if the undead refuses to give his head to him willingly. Because he needs Fuuko to survive for his own purposes, the undead agrees to willingly separate his head from his body. Upon hearing that, Fuuko is deeply moved by this act of sacrifice, as it marks the first time someone has been willing to risk their life for her. She then reveals to the undead about her ability, which the more intimate the body contact between them, the more extreme the misfortune he will experience. Together, they devise a plan where Fuuko kisses the undead immediately after his decapitation. As a result of this intimate contact, a meteorite crashes down on Lee and the undead, with only the latter surviving.
Oh, now I get it! You ran into the two of us?
After defeating Lee and his men, Fuuko decides to call the undead ND, since he cannot recall his real name. On the other hand, after realizing how powerful Fuuko's power is and what triggers it, ND tells Fuuko that they should have an intimate relationship to know the impact of such physical contact, which infuriates Fuuko because ND is only using her as a tool to achieve his own purpose. She also refuses to surrender her virginity to ND, explaining that her affection for someone significantly affects her power. Fuuko recounts how her grandfather, who she rarely saw, suffered minor injuries after kissing her and passed away 3 years later. Fuuko also adds that she will end up hating ND forever if he insists on forcing her to have an intimate relationship, which will only make it difficult for ND to achieve the best death he desires. Upon hearing that, ND decides to keep Fuuko alive for as long as possible. ND then takes Fuuko to his hiding place, where he puts heavy armor on Fuuko to protect her from people with malicious intentions toward her. ND also reveals to Fuuko that Lee and his men belong to a secret organization known as the Union, and the people with superpowers like them are often referred to as the Negators by the Union, which the organization has been researching the Negators for years. ND then reveals to Fuuko that 50 years ago, the Union captured him and subjected him to numerous experiments to test his unique abilities. The Union employed cruel and harsh methods to determine the extent of his power, which frightens Fuuko. She suggests they flee before the Union captures them. The next day, as ND and Fuuko attempt to leave town, they are suddenly attacked by a man named Void Volks, who dresses in a full mechanized suit resembling an office suit with a tie, who immediately attacks them. The attack immediately throws Fuuko to the side of the road, while ND appears to be severely injured and struggles to move. Upon seeing that, Fuuko immediately runs to save ND, but surprisingly, she cannot approach ND, as if there is something holding her back from stepping forward. Meanwhile, another man named Send appears behind Fuuko, and Void orders him to fulfill their mission by killing her. Soon after that, ND manages to recover and tries to resist, but unexpectedly, he struggles to launch an attack because of Void's Negator ability that negates his opponent's ability to dodge when he assumes a certain stance before attacking. On the other hand, Fuuko thought that this was caused by Sen standing behind her, because she also had difficulty stepping forward when Sen was near her. However, ND, who has met many Negators, immediately realizes that Sen is using his Negator ability to restrain Fuuko from moving from her current position. As ND and Void engage in combat, Fuuko asks Sen about the reason why neither he and Void are pursued by the Union, despite being Negators like ND and herself. Sen then explains that within the Union, there exists a special group called the Round Table, consisting of 10 Negators assigned with specific missions, including hunting down other Negators. Upon learning that, Fuuko and ND express their intention to join the Round Table. But Sen clarifies that the only way to join the Round Table is by killing the members of the Round Table to replace their positions in the group. Shortly after, Void manages to defeat ND and threatens Fuuko's life. But unexpectedly, ND quickly recovers and saves her. Knowing that ND truly cares for her, Fuuko then removes her gloves and touches his chest before she finally runs away, leaving him behind. Upon seeing that, Send and Void think that Fuuko is disregarding ND, although in reality, Fuuko intentionally does it so that ND will suffer a misfortune that can have a significant impact. As ND quietly retreats to confront Void and Send, a truck suddenly falls from the bridge and hurtles towards them. After that, ND manages to recover quickly and escape while Void and Send, who survived the accident, chase after him. In an attempt to escape from the Negators chasing him, ND begins to analyze Void's strength and quickly concludes that Void has a capability called the unavoidable. After learning Void's ability, ND then devises a plan to launch a counterattack using his left arm piece as bait. As Void takes the arm piece, ND appears and immediately shoots Void in the head, killing him. ND then prepares to attack Send and intends to kill him to secure positions for himself and Fuuko in the round table. But unexpectedly, he struggles to attack Send as he is very skilled in martial arts, deflecting all of his attacks. Shortly after, Fuuko arrives at the scene, intending to assist ND by throwing his sword for him to use against Send. However, Send reveals his negator ability, which preventing Fuuko from aiding ND by making her impossible to touch him indefinitely. Upon learning that, ND chooses to surrender and tells Send to take Fuuko so that she can replace Void in the round table. Realizing that ND cares deeply for her, Fuuko is deeply moved and decides to grant ND's request by starting to remove her clothes. Seeing this, Send bursts into laughter and tells them that they have a unique relationship. Understanding this, Send then informs ND and Fuuko about the Union's next mission in Russia and instructs them to kill the negator assigned to carry out that mission so that both of them can join the round table. After saying that, Send then leaves the scene while ND explains his plan to Fuuko so that they can safely arrive in Russia. Soon after, ND and Fuuko are seen aboard a yacht on their way to Russia. At that moment, ND explains to Fuuko about two formidable negators they'll face, surpassing the agents pursuing them, as they possess deadly abilities and were responsible for his previous capture. At the same time, they are surprised by the appearance of several fighter jets launching attacks towards them. The attack causes their ship to sink and Fuuko nearly drowns as her body is crushed by the wreckage of the ship at the bottom of the sea. Fortunately, ND manages to save Fuuko by relying on his regenerative abilities and rushes to bring Fuuko to the surface. ND then explains to Fuuko that he performs CPR to save her from drowning and shares his hypothesis regarding her abilities. He explains that Fuuko can attract objects that are far beyond her reach, such as lightning bolts and meteors, if Fuuko considers the physical contact that occurs between them as valuable things to her. Actions like cutting hair and kissing, which are significant to Fuuko as she's never experienced them before, allow her to summon lightning and meteors even though those objects are far beyond her reach. On the other hand, Fuuko, who just realized that ND has touched her breast, feels angry and embarrassed at the same time. But at that moment, a powerful explosion suddenly occurs underwater. ND then rushes to save Fuuko and lands right on top of a passing fighter jet. ND then kills the pilot and takes control of the fighter jet, revealing to Fuuko that her ability can be controlled and used against their enemies. However, Fuuko remains skeptical, believing her unluck is merely coincidental and uncontrollable. Shortly after, they receive a warning of the impending jet explosion, prompting ND to swiftly take Fuuko out of the fighter jet and performs an emergency landing, resulting in ND breaking his bones. However, ND is able to heal his injuries quickly, informing Fuuko that they have arrived at their destination. Considering it's Fuuko's first time traveling abroad due to her previous isolation at home, ND encourages her to explore the lake while he seeks assistance from an old friend. While walking along the beach, Fuuko accidentally encounters a girl painting. The girl is delighted to learn that Fuuko is from Japan and invites her to paint together. At that moment, the girl asks Fuuko whether she likes things that change or hates change. Fuuko appears stunned by the statement, and she asks the girl for time to think about her answer. That night after finishing her painting, Fuuko shares her answer with the girl. Soon after, the girl walks to the middle of the lake, and surprisingly, she is able to make the lake water float in the air.
Perhaps my age has finally caught up. The lake!
At the same time, ND appears and immediately attacks the girl, just after she reveals her identity as one of the members of the round table. ND then informs Fuuko that the girl is Gina, and she is the person who captured him 50 years ago. Gina seems aware of ND and Fuuko's intentions to replace her in the round table, and is determined to thwart their plans. On the other hand, Fuuko is very surprised to learn that Gina is the one who captured ND 50 years ago, because Gina appears to be the same age as her, even though she is over 60 years old. Gina claims to them that she will forever remain 16 years old. She also confesses her love for ND and viewing Fuuko as a romantic rival. She recounts their initial meeting, where she was forced to capture ND and hand him over to the Union to be used as an experimental subject. However, ND holds no grudge against Gina at all, which then makes Gina fall in love with him. While Gina was ranting about Send, ND took the opportunity to launch an attack by throwing a bomb at Gina. But it had no effect on her, and she could easily counterattack without needing to touch ND. At that moment, Fuuko then asked about ND's friend, but ND informed her that his friend was already dead, so they had no assistance to face Gina. Despite this, ND remained determined to gather information about her by fighting her. He analyzed Gina's ability to manipulate the lake and create invisible barriers and stairs. Despite his repeated attacks, Gina easily countered them until ND finally managed to get a little clue about her ability. ND then told Fuuko that he only needed to know the weakness of the barrier protecting Gina from his attacks, and for that, ND needed Fuuko's help. ND deliberately detonated himself to scatter his blood, knowing that Gina possessed the unchange ability that could negate the changes in the shapes of objects around her. With this ability, Gina could also suppress her aging and regenerate her body, although it took quite a long time. After learning Gina's ability, ND planned to bring great misfortune to attack Gina, and therefore, he asked Fuuko to touch his bare back with her bare breast. Although this made Fuuko feel uncomfortable and embarrassed, because they were making direct physical contact, Fuuko had no other choice because the only way for them to seize the position in the round table was by killing her. Upon seeing this, Gina immediately became furious and attacked them relentlessly, thinking that Fuuko intentionally seduced ND to take ND away from her. Amidst their battle, Fuuko realized that Gina was not entirely protected by the barrier she created with her unchange ability, and upon learning that, ND finally managed to find a way to defeat Gina by attacking the weak point of the barrier located under her feet. As they tried to evade Gina's attacks at the same time, they learned that Gina had been traveling on a cloaked spaceship equipped with laser weapons. After finding out the weak point of Gina's barrier, ND executed his plan by letting Gina launch attacks towards him until only his head remained.
Alright, here's what's gonna happen. It looks like...
Soon after that, Fuuko quickly diverted Gina's attention with ND's sword to weaken the defense of the barrier, and at the same time, she threw ND's head into the barrier so that the great misfortune that would befall ND could also impact Gina. Suddenly, the cloaked spaceship launched a devastating attack, shattering Gina's barrier and fatally injure her. Realizing Gina's unchangeability had collapsed, Fuuko searched for ND, finding him miraculously regenerated. As Gina had lost her strength, she was no longer able to use her unchangeability, so she could no longer hide the wrinkles that had aged her body. Despite Gina's aged appearance, ND embraced her while acknowledging her charm and beauty. Upon hearing that, Gina immediately felt touched and kissed ND before passing away peacefully in his arms. Although Gina was their enemy, Fuuko was deeply affected by her death, especially after ND told her about Gina, who always wanted to die peacefully rather than live by working for the Union and killing many people. Fuuko was determined to make changes within the Union so that no one would suffer like Gina. Amidst their conversation, Fuuko and ND were surprised by the appearance of a monster who then took them to the Round Table's headquarters to replace the positions of Void and Gina who had died. Upon their arrival, ND took advantage of the opportunity to attack the Round Table members to greet them, but they easily defended against his attacks. The first member and leader of the Round Table, Chuas, then welcomed ND and Fuuko as new members of the Round Table, followed by Send as the second member. The third member was Billy, who wielded a pistol, while the fourth member was an innocent-faced boy named Phil. Besides them, there was a girl named Tatiana, who lives in a spherical robot suit, as the fifth member, Isin as the sixth member, and Top and Nico as the seventh and eighth members, respectively. Meanwhile, Fuuko was the ninth member and ND was the 10th member. Soon after that, Tatiana suddenly attacked ND because she was still angry that ND had killed Gina. At the same time, Billy warned Tatiana to restrain her anger because members were prohibited from fighting. Not only Billy, but Juds also warned Tatiana and ND, who intended to continue their confrontation, threatening to harm their loved ones with her power. Because ND did not want to hurt Fuuko, and Tatiana also did not want to hurt Billy, they finally obeyed Juds' orders and returned to their seats. After all the members took their seats, the Book of Revelations, or Apocalypse, appeared before them to give them quests. The Roundtable members would receive rewards if they successfully completed the quests from Apocalypse, and they would be punished if they failed to complete the quests. This time, Apocalypse gave 6 quests that must be completed by the members. The first quest was to capture the unidentified mysterious animals, or undead burn, which could be done by 6 members with the option to add an 11th seat. The second quest was to capture undead eat with the participation of 5 members, and the third quest was to neutralize undead language, which could be done by 1 member only. The fourth quest was to capture a negator with the unseen ability, while the fifth quest was to capture undead past, which could be done by 3 members. Then, the sixth quest was to capture undead spoil, which could also be done by 3 members. Apocalypse then explained that they must complete all quests before August 31st, and if they failed, the punishment would be the addition of undead galaxies. Upon learning that, Juice ordered Nico to analyze the abilities and gather information related to the missions. With his abilities, Nico could determine that they could only complete the first 3 quests and suggested that they not take the 6th quest because it was too dangerous. Upon hearing this, Juice decided to focus on the first 3 quests because the other 3 quests were too dangerous for them. She preferred avoiding potential losses, even if it meant facing Apocalypse's punishment. Meanwhile, Fuuko asked the 7th member, Top, about Apocalypse. Top then explained that they had to complete quests to receive rewards and would face punishment if they failed. Knowing that Gina had suffered because she had to undertake dangerous quests from Apocalypse, Fuuko tried to express her opinion to Jiz and the Roundtable members, but Jiz then explained to Fuuko about the crucial tasks of the Roundtable members, also instructing Fuuko to surpass her record if Fuuko wanted to change the system they had applied for years. It turns out, Jiz became the #1 member and leader because she was the member who had completed the most quests among them. And if Fuuko wanted to replace Jiz, then Fuuko had to complete more quests than Jiz. Meanwhile, ND, who was impatient, reached for Apocalypse and asked about the most difficult quest of the book. Apocalypse replied that the most difficult quest was to capture undead spoil, and upon hearing that, ND decided to undertake the 6th quest with Fuuko and Send. Before departing on the mission, Fuuko was given a special uniform and emblem, which were the trademarks of the Union. Send also instructed ND to wear the uniform and emblem, because their uniforms had several advantages, such as being bulletproof, stab-proof, and very sturdy. In addition, their ties could also be used as VIP access cards at various places and public facilities, and they could also use those ties as tools to translate various languages. Send also emphasized the importance of wearing the emblem, because the emblem was one of the requirements for them to undertake quests from Apocalypse. But ND seemed to prefer being naked because his abilities often damaged his clothes. While ND and Send were arguing about which quests they would undertake, at the same time, they heard an announcement about Uma Clothes that had attacked an officer and managed to escape. Send's assistant Moe explained that Clothes was a undead that would stick to a person's body, transform into the most desired clothing by that person, then take over the person's body and rampage. Shortly after Mui gave this explanation, Clothes appeared and immediately attacked ND, but ND managed to render the person controlled by Clothes unconscious. ND and Sen believed they had subdued Clothes, but Mui cautioned that Clothes would seek a new host if the current one was incapacitated. At the same time, Clothes swiftly possessed Mui and attacked ND and Sen. While ND and Sen were trying to fend off Mui's attacks, Fuuko realized that Mui was suffering because her body was forcibly controlled by Clothes. Fuuko then bravely touched her, rendering Mui unconscious, but at the same time, Clothes targeted Fuuko and intended to control her body. Fortunately, ND quickly realized it and managed to save Fuuko just before Clothes attached to her body, causing Clothes to accidentally stick to ND's body instead. However, Clothes became frustrated because he had difficulty materializing the clothing desired by ND, as he wanted sturdy clothing that could regenerate when damaged. As ND mocked Clothes as a pathetic undead, an accident occurred to ND because he had touched Fuuko when he saved her. At the same time, ND managed to make Clothes obedient to him and turned Clothes into his clothing that could regenerate when damaged, although Clothes needed 15 seconds to regenerate. With Clothes under control, ND earned points and rose to the 9th position. Shortly afterward, ND and the others received information about a rotting corpse roaming the streets of New York City, which was related to the OONH spoiled mentioned in the 6th quest. Through the belongings in his clothes, the wandering rotting corpse was identified as a man named James W. Smith from Longing. On way to Longing, Send explained to Fuuko about OONH spoil that could turn someone into a zombie, while playing the audio data they obtained from the investigative team that had arrived earlier in the city and set up barricades around the city. Fuuko looked frightened listening to the audio recording, but ND didn't pay much attention to it.
What is this? My arm! Mine too! Kill it! Fire!
Although Sen informed him that they seemed to have to work hard and exert all their strength to defeat Spoil. That night, while they were resting, Fuuko told Sen that she wanted to help them defeat Spoil because she wanted to get the reward. Apocalypse apparently promised to reveal the location of Unrepair to them if they successfully completed the 6th quest. Fuuko assumed that Unrepair might provide some kind of clue or solution for ND to die. Fuuko then asked Sen about his reasons for agreeing to undertake the quest with them, even though he was forcibly chosen by ND. Sen replied that he might have the opportunity to meet the god of victory, named Victor, if he undertook the quest with ND. The next day, they arrived in Longing and discovered that most of the city's inhabitants had become zombies. Knowing that people who had transformed into zombies could not revert to being human again, ND immediately used his abilities to slaughter the city's residents who had turned into zombies, leaving only one woman who had not fully transformed into a zombie.
Knock, knock.
What do you think you're doing, huh? We were confining them! What? Would you look at that? Your boyfriend's cool!
He planned to use her to locate Spoil's hiding place, but Sent realized he could still use his abilities, which proved that he was still in the safe position. Sent then explained to ND that OOMAs were different from the negators because OOMAs were not bound by the rules usually held by the negators. OOMAs could move according to their wish and could attack their opponents from the distance they desired, unlike Sendu's abilities would only be active if he saw his target within a certain range, or Fuuko, whose abilities would be active if she made physical contact with someone. Sen then asked ND if he felt anything unusual in his body. ND then found a timer in his abdomen, suggesting they were in an area where Spoil's abilities were active. Upon learning that, ND decided to wait, curious if Spoil could turn him into a zombie, while reassuring Fuuko not to worry. After waiting for several hours, ND noticed his arm decaying, but at the same time, his regeneration ability immediately healed it, though he continued to decay. Upon seeing that, ND realized that he would continue to decay even if he repeatedly healed himself with his ability to regenerate. Not only his arm, but his head began decaying too, while Sen pondered how to communicate with the zombie woman, so they could find Spoil's location and defeat him. Because half of his brain had already decayed, ND understood the woman's word, who willing to reveal Spoil's location as long as ND agreed to marry her, because marriage was her dream. ND then asked Fuuko's permission, and because Fuuko gave her permission, ND hurried off to perform the wedding ceremony with the woman. Meanwhile, a boy named Ken suddenly emerged from the underground bunker, and Fuuko, realizing that the boy had not turned into a zombie, quickly jumped out of the truck and chased him into the underground bunker. Fuuko intended to explore deeper into the bunker, but Sen quickly halted her using his abilities, while warning Fuuko about Spoil's abilities, which might also include the underground area of the city. At the same time, Ken suddenly appeared with several other children while aiming pistols at them. Ken told Sen and Fuuko that they had all been cursed, showing the timer in his abdomen. Upon seeing that, Sen realized that Spoil gave the children a longer time before they transformed into zombies, pondering the motive behind it. Ken apparently intended to protect Fuuko and Sen from being cursed and turning into zombies. However, Fuuko deliberately ran towards Ken and hugged him, which caused her to enter Spoil's area and activate the timer in her abdomen. Meanwhile, impressed by Fuuko's bravery, Sen decided to follow her into Spoil's area, so they had no choice but to defeat Spoil to prevent themselves from turning into zombies. Meanwhile, ND and the zombie woman were in a church for their wedding, witnessed by other zombies. At that moment, the woman thanked ND for granting her wish and pleaded for him to save the remaining residents from Spoil by defeating him. She pointed out Spoil's hiding place inside an angel statue. At the same time, Spoil appeared and seemed annoyed to learn that ND's body could not decay because he was the negator with regeneration abilities. Spoil then transformed into his true form and demolished the church. But ND managed to survive because the zombie woman and the other zombies protected him. Knowing that the zombies could still understand his words, ND asked the zombies to help him defeat Spoil because Spoil had made their bodies decay and transform into zombies. Inside the bunker, Fuuko asked Ken to recount what had happened in the city before its residents turned into zombies. Ken explained that a week ago, Spoil had emerged in the city and began spreading a virus that slowly transformed the city's residents into zombies. Upon seeing this, a kindergarten teacher named Sunny led Ken and others to the underground bunker, assuring them to remain optimistic despite her own infection and would soon transform into a zombie. Sunny also shared her dream of finding a husband and having a grand wedding ceremony. She also advised them to hold onto their dreams because their bodies would not decay as long as they had dreams in their hearts. Hearing the story about their teacher, a little girl named Mi started crying because she missed her so much. At the same time, Ken, realizing that Mi was running out of time as the timer on her abdomen drastically decreased, quickly comforted Mi and reminded her of her dream to own a flower shop. Upon hearing this, Mi's cheerfulness returned and her timer increased, giving her more time before she transformed into a zombie. On the other hand, ND appeared to be engaged in a fierce battle with Spoil while carrying the woman who turned out to be Sunny. Apparently, Sunny had not fully decayed because she still had dreams that she wanted to fulfill before passing away. At the same time, Fuuko and the others then emerged from the bunker and found that the zombies were also helping ND fight Spoil. When Ken saw the bride being carried by ND, he immediately called out to her, and Fuuko soon realized that ND's bride was Sunny. ND then instructed Fuuko and sent to look after Sunny while he would fight Spoil. Ken and Mi joyfully reunited with their teacher, while Fuuko could barely hold back her tears when witnessing the touching moment between the teacher and her students. Shortly after, a zombie suddenly appeared and touched Fuuko. Although the zombie didn't hurt her at all, Fuuko looked startled because anyone who touched her would inevitably experience misfortune. Shortly after, as the zombie approached Spoil, a billboard on top of a building suddenly fell, crushing Spoil and killing the zombie. Upon seeing that, ND immediately realized something and ordered the zombies to touch Fuuko so that they would experience misfortune that would bring disaster to Spoil. Upon hearing this, without hesitation, Sunny ran towards Fuuko and hugged her. Fuuko, realizing ND's plan, then took off her gloves and touched Sunny with her bare hands. On the other hand, Ken, who had no idea about ND's plan, wondered why his teacher suddenly left them and intended to chase after her. However, Sen quickly used his abilities to stop Ken because he knew that Sunny intended to sacrifice herself so that they could defeat Spoil. With all the determination she had to protect her students and avenge Spoil for destroying the city, Sunny ran towards Spoil without feeling the slightest fear. When Spoil captured her, suddenly the ground around them collapsed, causing a powerful explosion that brought down Spoil. Although Spoil could rise again, Fuuko resolved to defeat him to protect Ken and others. She touched the zombies with her bare hand, and they touched her, while Sen instructed the children to hide. Knowing that Fuuko and Sen had also been cursed by Spoil, ND decided to kill Spoil to save their lives, even though it violated the orders from Apocalypse, who tasked them with capturing Spoil alive. But unexpectedly, Spoil sucked the zombies into his mouth, then transformed into a much more terrifying monster. With his new form, Spoil could decay anything, endangering all life. As Spoil was about to kill them, surprisingly, Sen was able to deflect the attack with his abilities, but Spoil quickly launched attacks that instantly destroyed Sen's arm sleeve and also ND's arm. Upon seeing that, ND immediately realized that with Spoil's current power, he could destroy all living beings he desired, and therefore, ND intended to defeat Spoil before they ran out of time. Unexpectedly, ND struggled to approach Spoil as he began decaying rapidly before launching an attack. On the other hand, Spoil attacked ND and explained that ND would undergo a much faster decaying process than before, so his regeneration ability would not have enough time to heal him. After incapacitating ND, Spoil then approached Sen and Fuuko, while boasting about himself and ranting about the weaknesses of humans. Sen, realizing something, left Fuuko to confront Spoil alone. Despite Spoil's attempts to intimidate her, Fuuko, thinking of Ken and Mi, stood firm, asserting that they wouldn't allow their dreams to be destroyed even if their bodies decayed. While showing the timer on her abdomen, indicating that she was running out of time, Fuuko firmly told Spoil that their hearts would never decay as long as they still had dreams. Surprisingly, the number on the timer on Fuuko's abdomen suddenly increased, giving her more time. As Fuuko ran to help ND, Sen reappeared and praised Fuuko, while expressing his dream of becoming the strongest in the world. Just like Fuuko, Sen's timer drastically increased, showing Spoil's rules didn't affect those with dreams. Sen then ran towards Spoil and managed to hit him with his staff. Upon seeing that, ND warned Sen not to get too close to Spoil, because he could decay rapidly. But Sen apparently knew that Spoil's decay domain was only around his body because when Spoil approached Fuuko with his head, Fuuko did not decay at all. However, when Spoil's head reattached to his body, Sen could no longer launch attacks from close range, because his body could decay very quickly. Luckily, Sen had a Nyoikinko staff that could extend and retract on its own, allowing him to strike Spoil. Additionally, Sen could use his ability to influence any target within his line of sight, which with his ability, Sen could make Spoil unable to evade his attacks even if Spoil tried to dodge them. As Sen continued to relentlessly attack Spoil, ND then asked him about capturing Spoil and stopping his curse without having to kill him. Sen explained that Spoil should have a core inside his body, which was his weakness. Sen also intended to extract this core from Spoil's body, but with his current form, anyone who approached Spoil would decay very quickly, so it was impossible for Sen to get close to him. Sen added that if only they had the ability to seal decay, then they might be able to defeat Spoil without having to kill him. Annoyed because Sen kept attacking him, Spoil tried to launch a disintegrating laser attack towards Sen, but he failed because Sen had already used his ability to stop Spoil. In the midst of the battle, Sen suddenly became very excited because with the emergence of Spoil, who was so powerful and difficult to defeat, Sen had the opportunity to meet the god of victory, whom he had longed to meet. On the other hand, Fuuko pondered how to stop Spoil's decay ability. ND then revealed that decay is caused by bacteria in the air. Since bacteria require air moisture to grow and reproduce, one thing they need to do to slow down decay is to reduce air moisture. Soon after that, ND pinched Fuuko's abdomen, then stood up and told Sen to step back because he had a plan to defeat Spoil by blowing him up. Surprisingly, the ground beneath them suddenly split, and ND fell underground. At the same time, Spoil took advantage of it to evade Sen's ability by demolishing the buildings around them, then creating a sandstorm to obstruct Sen's vision. Knowing that Spoil was planning something to kill them, Sen then told Fuuko to step back and find shelter, but Fuuko instead told Sen about the vacuum of space. Fuuko explained that there is no air moisture in outer space, so they would not experience decay. Upon hearing that, Sen immediately understood Fuuko's words, and then told ND that he could lift ND and Spoil into space, so ND could defeat Spoil. As the journey into space takes some time, Sen then told ND to draw on his card so ND would have enough power to withstand the decay while mentioning ND's past self. ND was initially reluctant to pull out the card stuck on his forehead, but he seemed to have no other choice but to defeat Spoil, because he didn't want Fuuko to die from decay. ND then told Sen that he agreed to pull out his card from his forehead, but he had two conditions that Sen had to fulfill. After Sen agreed to ND's conditions, Sen then gave his staff to ND, then contacted Mui to locate Spoil so they could lift ND and Spoil into space together. Soon after that, ND emerged from the ground while holding the Nyoikinko staff, which suddenly enlarged and soared high into the sky. After reaching a certain height, ND then pulled out the card stuck on his forehead and threw the card at Sen, while telling Sen to keep the card until he returned. Upon seeing that, Fuuko then asked Sen what would happen to ND when he pulled out his card, because ND had said to her that he would lose his sanity if the card was removed from his head. In space, Spoil wasted no time and launched a disintegrating laser at ND, who surprisingly regenerated quickly. Even his appearance changed with long black hair and cold demeanor. ND then turned his two fingers into his clones, then cut Spoil's body to extract the core inside his body. After successfully obtaining Spoil's core, ND then cut off his arm and sent Spoil's core back to Earth as promised to Sen. On the other hand, Sen and Fuuko seemed to send the children away from that place because they had successfully defeated Spoil. Sen then told Ken to take care of his friends until they arrived at the location where the Union crew would pick them up and take them to safety. At the same time, Mui informed Sen that their preparations were complete, although Fuuko did not know exactly what preparations Mui was referring to. However, Fuuko felt relieved because they had at least managed to save the children, even though the other residents had turned into zombies and lost their lives in the fight against Spoil. Shortly after, ND arrived carrying Spoil's core, but Sen instead instructed Fuuko to step back and ordered Mui to take Spoil's core. After Mui managed to secure Spoil's core, ND then asked Sen about the current year and date. But Sen immediately sensed something odd about ND because ND seemed not just to have lost his memory, but had also transformed into a different person. At the same time, ND suddenly felt pain in his head and began to ramble, until he regained his composure, then walked towards Fuuko and called her Unluck. Sen tried to protect Fuuko and called ND by the name Victor, which was the god of victory. Unexpectedly, Victor immediately denied it and asserted to Sen that he was not the god of victory but a human. At such a close range, Sen should have been able to use his ability to evade Victor's attacks, but surprisingly, Victor could easily attack Sen. The attacks were so powerful that Victor's legs and arms broke every time he attacked Sen. Instead of feeling scared, Sen appeared excited because he had finally met Victor, the strongest negator with terrifying power. Although Victor insisted that he was a human, Sen thought that Victor was not human at all, because humans unconsciously control themselves to survive, but Victor willingly hurt or destroyed himself because he knew he wouldn't die. On the other hand, Fuuko, after seeing Sen defeated by Victor, she tried to use her ability by touching Victor directly. But surprisingly, Fuuko's ability had no effect on Victor, even though Victor had ND's memories of various accidents that happened to ND when Fuuko touched him. Knowing that killing Fuuko would make ND desperate and surrendered his body to him completely, Victor intended to kill Fuuko, but she did not give up and tried to convince ND to fight Victor from within. Upon hearing that, Victor told Fuuko that her efforts were futile, but at the same time, Sen managed to rise again and prepared to launch a counterattack. Sen then told Victor that he must fulfill his two promises to ND, which were to protect the children and then defeat Victor. Sen then used one of his signature moves to lift Victor's body into the sky, even though he was severely injured in the process. Fortunately, the Roundtable members arrived just in time after receiving a message from Sen. Victor immediately became excited when they all came to attack him. But Juz and the others had prepared a plan to fight Victor, because they had captured Victor before and conducted research for years to find a way to defeat him. Nico had even found a way to split Victor's body and burn the body parts to significantly slow down his regeneration ability, but that still couldn't stop Victor, who apparently had various ways to regenerate, unlike ND, who was still bound by some rules. After his body was restored, Victor warned them to leave the place and threatened to kill them if they insisted on stopping him. However, none of them felt intimidated when facing Victor, the strongest immortal in the world, known as the God of Victory, who had also won so many battles in the past. As the leader of the Round Table, Juz then initiated the attack while instructing Top to take Fuuko and send to a safer place because their abilities were ineffective against Victor. Upon seeing that, Victor kicked the Nyoikinko's staff to stop them, but at the same time, Sen ordered the staff to shorten, and they eventually managed to escape. Fuuko then thanked Top, who kept running around them, but she instead told Top to take her back to ND's location. Top warned Fuuko that Victor was not ND, and they were different people, but Fuuko seemed determined to bring ND back, and she even asked for the card entrusted by ND to send. Without hesitation, Sen then handed the card to Fuuko, and he even gave a pistol to Fuuko for protection, because he had promised ND to protect Fuuko. Shortly afterward, Fuuko immediately ran back to the city to confront Victor, and Top reluctantly followed her, even though he had been assigned to take her away from the battlefield. Meanwhile, Victor deliberately created many clones of himself to face the attacks from the Roundtable members, so that he could observe each of their abilities and find ways to kill them. On the other hand, Fuuko and Top finally arrived in the city and tried to find the real Victor. They eventually found the real Victor fighting against Juz, and upon seeing that, Fuuko instructed Top to bring her closer to Victor so she could execute her plan. Surprisingly, Fuuko pulled her shirt up and then jumped onto Victor's shoulder to bring about a major accident. Although this left Juz and the others stunned and wondering what Fuuko was planning, Fuuko successfully eliminated all of Victor's clones. Juz, who finally realized Fuuko's plan, then asked her about the time needed for the accident to happen. But Fuuko replied that she couldn't be sure because the accident happened shortly after she touched ND. Upon learning this, Juz instructed Fuuko to hold on longer while trying to call ND so that he could immediately swap personalities with Victor. But Victor asserted that he was the real one, so it was futile for them to try calling ND, even if he tried to resist from within. Victor then created several clones of himself to kill Fuuko, but Top quickly disposed of one of them to save Fuuko. A fierce battle ensued between the Roundtable members and Victor's clones, making Victor even more annoyed because the Roundtable members joined forces to protect Fuuko and each other. Juz asserted that someone devoid of justice like Victor could never win against them. While Juz and the others fought desperately against Victor while protecting her, Fuuko thought of a way to draw ND's personality out of Victor's body. Although she had only known ND for a month and knew nothing about him, Fuuko was determined to save ND because he had saved her life, and he was the only one who truly cared for her. Fuuko realized that Victor's clones didn't have any scars on their foreheads, and Fuuko used the pistol given by Sen to shoot Victor's forehead. Fuuko was confident that Victor was holding ND there, so she attempted to draw ND's personality out by pressing the wound, while calling out her promise to ND to bring about the greatest accident to fulfill his wish. Surprisingly, ND appeared, even only half of him. ND seemed pleased that Fuuko was willing to risk her life to help him, even though she had to face his other personality, which was far more terrifying than him. Without hesitation, ND then kissed Fuuko, and Fuuko seemed to enjoy the kiss, while Juz and the others appeared distracted watching their intimate moment. Shortly afterward, ND told Fuuko that they would continue their kiss another time, which made Fuuko feel extremely embarrassed, causing her face to turn red. Fuuko then instructed Juz and the others to leave the place soon because a major accident was about to happen to ND and Victor. Victor, who had taken over ND's body, then tried to launch an attack, but unexpectedly, Sen used his ability to stop him, explaining that he lied about his limited ability range. With his ability, Sen could also immobilize Victor in place so that he couldn't escape the impending disaster. Soon after that, the city was bombarded by hundreds of meteors, causing a massive explosion and flash flood. Juz and the Roundtable members managed to survive the disaster. But after the flood receded, Fuuko ran to ND, who lay helpless due to severe burns. Fuuko then placed the card on ND's forehead, hoping that he would fully return. But at the same time, another flood came and washed over them. Several days later, Fuuko woke up to find herself in a hospital room with ND sitting beside her, reading her favorite girl's manga. Fuuko looked so happy because ND had returned, but he was absorbed in reading the manga. Fuuko then expressed her frustration because ND and Sen were planning something that could potentially make ND disappear forever, which made her very sad because she didn't want to lose ND and be alone again. Seeing how worried Fuuko was, ND apologized to her and thanked her for saving him. ND then stroked Fuuko's head and called her by her name, which surprised Fuuko because ND had never called her by her name before. Fuuko asked ND to repeat it so she could hear it clearly when ND said her name, but ND refused and changed the subject. ND then informed Fuuko that Tatiana had visited her and gifted her a doll. Additionally, Ken and the others also visited Fuuko and gave her a sunflower painting they had painted themselves. ND also informed her that the Union Orphanage would take care of the children until they were 18 years old and mature enough to take care of themselves. Fuuko appeared relieved upon hearing that, but she suddenly remembered Sunny and felt anxious that Sunny might leave bad memories for Ken and the others. However, ND said that Sunny had strong feelings and determination to survive, which had been conveyed well to her students even though she decayed. Therefore, Ken and the others would surely remember their teacher well, because Sunny was the one who taught them to keep dreaming and have the determination to survive. While ND was boasting about himself and thinking that Fuuko was starting to like him, ND's body suddenly caught fire, which was the accident ND got after touching her head. ND and Fuuko then went to the meeting room, where Juz and the Roundtable members were waiting for them. Because ND had managed to tame clothes some time ago, ND's position rose to number 9, pushing Fuuko down to number 10. But Fuuko didn't seem to mind because she also acknowledged that ND was indeed great. The scene then shifted to an abandoned building where Unseen had been successfully captured by a man who was also a negator. Although his body was not visible, Blood flowing from the wound on his stomach could still be seen. The man told Unseen that the wound on his stomach would not heal until he died, and the man also swore that he would not let Unseen be captured by the Union. Meanwhile, as all the roundtable members had taken their seats, Apocalypse appeared to report on the results of some quests they had undertaken. Fuuko, who just realized that it was August 31st, was shocked because she didn't expect to have been unconscious for quite some time after the incident. Apocalypse then announced that they had completed several quests, including capturing Oomanaid Burn with the addition of an 11th seat in the roundtable as a reward, capturing Oomanaid Eat with information about the location of Unburn as a reward, and neutralizing Oomanaid language with the unification of all languages in the world as a reward. Upon hearing that, Sent contacted Mu and spoke to her in Chinese, but Mu didn't understand his words at all, indicating that the unification of languages in the world had already occurred because people other than the Negators had lost all memory of the various cultures and languages they used daily. Additionally, they had also completed several other quests, such as capturing Oomanaid Past with information about the location of the Rebellion artifact as a reward, and also capturing Oomanaid Spoil with information about the location of Unrepair as a reward. Hearing this, Fuuko appeared excited because they finally got clues about the location of Unrepair, which might be able to kill ND. But ND seemed to have concluded that Unseen had been captured by Unrepair, because everyone who tried to find Unseen was found dead, which proved that Unrepair had used his ability to kill them. However, because they failed to complete the quest to capture Unseen, Apocalypse added Oomanaid Galaxy as a punishment. Jiz then ordered Umamu to move them to the surface to face Apocalypse's punishment. Not long after, they finally arrived at a place in Australia, but they found nothing there, so Fuuko commented that the punishment might not be as terrifying as she had previously thought. However, Jiz denied it and affirmed the punishment from Apocalypse always brought rules that could drag humanity towards their extinction, and this punishment was no exception. Shortly afterward, Oomanaid Galaxy then used its ability to create a galaxy with new rules, and Jiz instructed Nico to investigate the galaxy. With the help of his assistants, Nico managed to gather all the information about the galaxy, then informed them about the galaxy consisting of celestial bodies like Earth. It turns out, Apocalypse's punishment this time brought forth many celestial bodies like Earth along with a system involving them such as cultures, myths, and so on. Moreover, the system also introduced extraterrestrial life forms like aliens, which made the inhabitants of the planets in that galaxy regard them as aliens and intend to attack them. Along with Nico's explanation, several spacecraft suddenly appeared, and Nico informed them that the spacecraft were piloted by aliens who had been trained in warfare for hundreds of millions of years. Furthermore, the aliens intended to take over the planet they currently inhabited by destroying all life on Earth, because their planet was on the brink of destruction. Soon after that, the alien leader came to confront them and announced their goal to invade Earth and exterminate all humanity on Earth. But surprisingly, Jiz stepped forward to confront the leader and ordered him to withdraw his troops because she refused to let Earth be colonized by extraterrestrial beings like them. The leader, angered by Jiz's refusal to surrender, then attempted to intimidate her mentally by detonating a rock mountain near them. But Jiz didn't feel the least bit intimidated. The leader then ranted about their vision and mission, while belittling the Earth's inhabitants by calling them a foolish and technologically backward species. Upon hearing that, Jiz removed her helmet and used her ability, Unjustice, to deny justice in the leader's view. With her ability, Jiz could easily make the aliens fight each other and destroy their spacecraft. The leader, seeing this, was shocked and confused by what had happened because he didn't expect his troops to attack each other. Meanwhile, Jiz then turned to ND and Fuuko, who were new members, and told them that what had just happened was a punishment from Apocalypse. All of this time they managed to postpone the extinction of humanity with their abilities. It couldn't be denied that the apocalypse might occur soon if they failed to complete all quests from Apocalypse. Furthermore, Jiz also explained about the stone tablet with 101 holes they found along with Apocalypse. Every time they received a punishment, one hole would be filled, and so far, they had received punishment 99 times, so only one hole remained unfilled, before they finally received the last punishment, Ragnarok. Therefore, to avoid the destruction of this world, they must avoid Apocalypse's punishment and complete all quests, no matter how difficult, given by Apocalypse. Because quests wouldn't be given until all seats were filled. Juice then told all the roundtable members that their current priority was to find the 11th member, and they only had 3 months before Apocalypse punished them for failing to get the 11th member. During their conversation, the leader, who had already kneeled before Juice, then inquired about their true identities, but Juice emphasized to the leader to convey a message to all extraterrestrial beings not to invade Earth. Shortly afterward, Juice then used her ability to send the leader away from Earth. Juice then instructed ND and Fuuko to capture Unrepair and persuade him to join them. In this mission, ND and Fuuko would also be assisted by Tatiana under Juice's orders. In the following days, ND and Fuuko were seen on their way to Rio de Janeiro to attend an underground auction. ND explained that underground auctions usually dealt with the negators, OMS, or artifacts that were difficult to control by the Union. The underground auction was orchestrated by mafias from around the world that had been disbanded before, but the Union received information that the auction had resumed operations some time ago. Although the location of the underground auction always changed, this time, Juice managed to obtain information that the auction would be held on a luxury cruise ship docked at the Rio de Janeiro harbor, which was also the location of Unrepair. They intended to sneak into the luxury cruise ship disguised as invited guests with fake access cards made by Nico. Since the invited guests were usually wealthy individuals and famous celebrities worldwide, ND and Fuuko went to a shopping center in Rio de Janeiro to buy some clothes. ND seemed interested in buying an expensive white suit he tried on, but Fuuko appeared annoyed and embarrassed because she had to wear revealing clothes that exposed her body. ND argued that he needed to touch her body more freely to bring about a far more catastrophic accident than before, but she disagreed with that because the accident could harm innocent people around them. Upon hearing that, ND then questioned whether the people attending the auction were entirely innocent, because they openly engaged in human trafficking, which was a crime. After hearing ND's explanation, Fuuko reluctantly took some clothes chosen by him for her, and at the same time, Fuuko also remembered her conversation with Juice before she embarked on the mission with ND. At that moment, Fuuko asked Juice why she assigned her to accompany ND and Tatiana on the mission to capture Unrepair, and Juice simply replied that it was part of her justice. Juice explained that her justice was to protect Earth and the innocent people living on it. This reason also led Juice to order Void and send to kill Fuuko, because she believed that her abilities posed a significant danger to the people around her. However, after their fight against Victor, Juice realized the great potential that Fuuko possessed. Juice assumed that they might have enough power to kill the god if they could control Fuuko's abilities. Nevertheless, Juice admitted that Fuuko's abilities were still far from what they had hoped for, while Ragnarok was drawing near. Therefore, Juice asked Fuuko to continue working with ND, and if necessary, Fuuko had to fall in love with ND, so that the effect of the accidents produced could exceed their expectations. In the present, Fuuko finally chose a red dress, and ND seemed satisfied with the choice because Fuuko looked beautiful wearing the red dress. After shopping, ND then took Fuuko for a walk, but he ended up mentioning the kiss from earlier, which made her flee. ND then chased after Fuuko while persuading her to kiss him, because he also suffered the same misfortune as Victor. However, Fuuko instead took off her gloves, and with help of clothes, touched ND's chest with her bare hands. At the same time, a truck crashed into ND, causing him to plunge into the sea and be devoured by a shark. Shortly after, Fuuko apologized to Clothes for experiencing the same misfortune with ND, promising to give him a roll of thread, which was Clothes' favorite food. Fuuko then approached ND and apologized to him for causing a chain of accidents, but ND instead talked about Victor and admitted that he didn't know Victor at all. ND thought that Victor might be telling the truth about being the real one because ND didn't remember anything about himself. ND felt a little worried that Victor would appear and try to kill Fuuko. However, Fuuko said that she would use her abilities to defeat Victor if that happened again because she was confident that ND wouldn't disappear. Fuuko then reached out her hands to help ND stand up, but she forgot to put her gloves back on, so another misfortune befell ND. Apparently, this time the misfortune was Tatiana, who suddenly fell on ND because Fuuko's ability caused her to miss the landing spot. Tatiana then explained to Fuuko about their plan to capture Unrepair and asked Fuuko and ND to act well so that their disguises wouldn't be discovered, because the fake access cards made by Nico stated that ND and Fuuko were a married couple. Long story short, ND and Fuuko managed to deceive the guards with the fake access cards made by Nico and entered the restricted area allowed only for participants of the underground auction. On the ship, Fuuko accidentally overheard some people talking about the cryptid and asked ND about it. ND then replied that they were discussing OOMAs, and Fuuko looked shocked to learn that the wealthy people attending the auction treated OOMAs as worthless objects that could be discarded or killed anytime they got bored. Not only that, Fuuko also overheard people talking about the negator, which was the main item at this auction, and learned that recently the negators had become easier to find. ND explained that it might be because of the language unification as a reward from their quest, which made it easier for non-negators to find the negator. Upon learning that, Fuuko assumed that the reward might not be a good thing for the negators, and she felt guilty about it. Fuuko then wondered whether it was better to bring the negators to the Union or let them be sold at the underground auction. But ND replied that both options were the same because in the end, they would also die, either while on a mission or as playthings for the wealthy. Seeing Fuuko looking concerned about the negators to be auctioned, ND told her that the negators at least had 3 ways of life. First, they could accept their abilities and live their lives normally. Second, they could become desperate and choose death. And the third was those who chose to live as criminals and use their abilities to harm others. However, ND also mentioned a 4th option, which is to eradicate the source of that power or to kill the god. ND initially thought that joining the Union was a reckless choice, but after meeting the members of the Round Table, he changed his mind and decided to fight alongside the Union to defeat the god. While ND and Fuuko were engaged in a serious conversation, 2 guards confronted a couple who insisted on being on the ship's deck because they wanted to see the starry night sky. A young man named Reap tried to persuade the guards to allow him and his girlfriend, Latla, to be in that place, but one of the guards pointed a gun at Reap's head, threatening him. Reap then calmly asked Latla if he would die there, and Latla confirmed it as if she had the ability to predict. But unexpectedly, Reap quickly slashed the guard's throat to kill them. One guard intended to stop the bleeding on his neck, but surprisingly, he couldn't use both of his hands. Reap then whistled to summon Kane, the giant orca whale, also an OOMA8, which then spat out 2 negators, Creed and Fang, who were Reap's comrades. Creed then asked if he should wear clothes like Reap and disguise himself, but he replied that it wasn't necessary because they would wreak havoc on the ship to capture the negator who would be sold in this auction. While Reap and his comrades walked away from the deck, Tatiana, who was hiding there, immediately reported their plan to ND and the other members of the Round Table. Juiz, upon hearing the report, immediately realized that Reap and his comrades were a group hunting the negators, and they might have kidnapped unseen. Although Reap and his group had one similarity with the Union, which was to capture the negators, their goals were diametrically opposed because Reap and his group intended to seek revenge on the world. Moreover, they also shared one similarity, which was that they would not hesitate to kill negators who were deemed useless or too dangerous. Upon hearing that, Fuuko strongly opposed it after learning the real reason from Juiz, and she was determined to stop Reap and his group because unleashing anger and seeking revenge on the world was a wrong action. Fuuko then climbed onto ND's back, and they hurried to the auction location, defeating several guards in the process. With the help of Tatiana, who brought ND's sword, they managed to defeat the guards who surrounded them and descended the stairs to the warehouse, where the auction items were stored to find the negator before Reap and his comrades. ND then instructed Fuuko to prepare herself because the worst thing they would face was fighting against Reap and his comrades, who were the negators. But unexpectedly, upon arrival, they found a stack of explosives with a timer that exploded shortly after they arrived there. Meanwhile, a young man named Shikara managed to steal the key and stealthily attempted to escape from the place. Unfortunately, Chikara was caught by the guard who then tried to chase him. Chikara panicked and used his ability to stop the guard. Since Chikara had to keep staring at the target to use his ability, gradually he felt tired and once again attempted to flee, but the guard pointed a gun at him instead. Chikara became frustrated being in a life-threatening situation. The scene then shifted to the past, showing Chikara trying to live a normal life even though he had special abilities. Chikara had always hidden his abilities for years, but a few days ago, everyone suddenly could only communicate in English, as if other languages had never existed in the world. Chikara became extremely frustrated because he couldn't speak English, but unexpectedly, 2 men suddenly made him unconscious and abducted him. When Chikara regained consciousness, he found himself imprisoned there with some strange creatures to be auctioned off. Due to Chikara's extreme fear and trembling, he inadvertently deactivated his ability, allowing the guard to move again and approach him while pointing a weapon at him. Shortly after, Reap arrived at the scene and killed the guard, then walked towards Chikara. Reap seemed pleased to learn about the type of ability Chikara had because there was no negator with that type of ability on his team. However, as Reap was not Japanese, he did not understand Chikara's words when he asked about his ability. So Creed took the initiative to attack Chikara with his weapon to ascertain his ability. Although Lapla commented that Creed's actions were too extreme, Reap apparently didn't mind at all, because if Chikara couldn't use his ability consciously, then he was completely useless to them. Therefore, they had to kill Chikara if he was indeed useless, so that his ability could be transferred to someone else who might be much stronger than him. Chikara, who completely did not understand why he was abducted and targeted for murder, became even more frustrated because his life had changed drastically since he acquired that special ability. Chikara became desperate and prepared to accept his fate to die there when Creed began firing the Gatling gun at him. Fortunately, ND arrived just in time to protect Chikara, and when Creed stopped the attack, Fuuko quickly handed a translator device to Chikara so that he could understand their conversation. ND immediately realized that Creed was a negator because he could shoot the Gatling gun without ammunition, although he did not know the abilities of Reap and the others yet. While ND was guessing their abilities, Reap quickly approached ND and slashed his neck, revealing that he was on repair. ND intended to cut off his head to heal the wound and regenerate, but Reap asserted that injuries caused by his ability were irreversible. Reap soon learned that ND and Fuuko were the Union who were also hunting the negators just like them. Moreover, Reap also learned that the language unification that happened some time ago was the Union's doing, and thanked them because hunting the negators became easier because of it. Although Reap claimed that the wound couldn't be healed, ND seemed to have another way to heal it and signaled to Fuuko. Understanding ND's plan, Fuuko then took ND's sword and rode on his back to decapitate him while ND ran towards Reap to bring him down. At the same time, Tatiana appeared to capture Creed and Fang, then took them away from there while instructing ND to face Reap and Latla. ND then launched a counterattack towards Reap, but Reap easily avoided the attack and injured both of ND's hands. Without hesitation, ND intentionally cut off his own arms to attack Reap, but Latla managed to protect Reap with her ability, while Chikara looked terrified watching their fight. Seeing ND and Fuuko's abilities, Reap then persuaded them to join his team, saying that he would kill Chikara and transferred his ability to someone much stronger than him. However, ND was not willing at all to join Reap and his crew, and he also felt disappointed because Unrepair's ability was not as powerful as he thought. When Fuuko asked Reap about their goals, Reap replied that he wanted to recruit tough negators, then form a nation and rule the world. Upon learning that, Fuuko told Reap that they should blame the god, but Reap seemed completely uninterested in opposing the god. On the other hand, ND tried to attack Latla, but she managed to deflect the attack even though she couldn't avoid ND's blood splatters. Meanwhile, Reap, who wanted to end it all quickly, launched a fatal attack towards Chikara to kill him. ND tried to hold back the attack, but Reap's knife pierced his arm. Upon seeing that, Fuuko hurried to protect Chikara until Reap's knife wounded her abdomen. Reap looked disappointed because he failed to kill Chikara, but he also told ND that Fuuko would die in an hour due to bleeding and her wound couldn't be healed by anything. Upon hearing that, ND appeared furious and intended to remove the card from his head to summon Victor. However, Fuuko assured ND of her condition and asked him to remain himself. At the same time, the guards arrived and surrounded them. Reap and Latla took advantage of the opportunity to escape, while ND was trapped and unable to escape because the guards pointed their weapons at them. Feeling guilty because Fuuko was injured because of him, Chikara then took off his jacket and tried to cover the wound. ND warned Chikara not to touch Fuuko's skin directly because he could die, but Chikara was determined to save her. In the past, when Chikara visited his dying mother in the hospital, his mother urged him to use his ability to protect those who were kind to him. Since his ability was revealed, Fuuko and ND were the first people who had no intention of killing him, and they didn't hesitate to protect him even if they got injured in the process. Therefore, Chikara was determined to become braver to repay the kindness of Fuuko and ND, who had fought tirelessly to protect him. Chikara then tied his hair back and confronted the guards to inform them that Fuuko was injured. Chikara pleaded with the guards to let them go so they could save Fuuko's life. However, the guards seemed uninterested in letting them go and instead fired shots at them simultaneously. Upon seeing that, Chikara quickly activated his ability, Unmove, to stop the bullets to protect Fuuko and ND who were behind him. ND, witnessing Chikara's ability, seemed impressed because he actually had a pretty powerful ability, although he wasn't accustomed to using it in combat. This is the end from the first part of the story. Moral lesson from the story: sometimes trying to impress someone can lead to unexpected and hilarious accidents. So if you ever find yourself in love, just make sure your romantic gestures don't make someone fail to land.